Hello teachers, in this video I'll walk you through the Gifted and Talented Program identification process at BBS and how to complete the Renzulli scale survey in order to either identify or rate a student for the program. So by the end of this video you should be able to understand the identification process that we currently have, learn how to complete the Renzulli surveys, and finally explore the different program provisions that we have in place for our Gifted and Talented program. Before we move on, I just want to make sure that we have a common language and a common understanding of what we define a high potential and gifted learner as here in BBS. So a high potential learner is someone who demonstrates the ability to achieve high levels of performance and performs at the top 10% in comparison of their peers. And a gifted learner is a learner who performs at the top 5% of their peers. It's also important to keep in mind twice exceptional learners. So we have many students in BBS that would fit this category where they could be both intellectually gifted and talented, but also display some form of learning difficulty, whether that be ADHD or dyslexia, etc. Another thing to keep in mind is that we use Renzulli's three-ring conception of giftedness to frame a lot of our understanding of what we define a high potential and gifted learner at BBS to be. And this definition kind of defines or contextualizes gifted behavior as a combination or a subset of three different areas. Above average ability, which is related to academic and cognitive giftedness. Task commitment, which is related to motivation and leadership abilities, and creativity. Now, when it comes to our identification process, we really wanted to capture both measurable achievement and observed potential, ensuring that we have a well-rounded assessment of the student's abilities. So you'll notice that we have identification metrics that are both quantitative and qualitative. And we're going to be kind of using these metrics. They're going to eventually contribute to a composite score. And we're going to be also using local norms to help us determine the cutoffs, allowing us to identify the students in different talent domains. So the reason why we wanted to use this well-rounded approach to identification is to hopefully ensure equity and inclusivity, and to recognize that a lot of our students' strengths go beyond just academic achievement. We didn't want to just focus on academic achievement as like the main identifier of what a gifted or high potential learner looks like at BBS. So within our metrics, you'll notice that there are three main categories: above average ability, task commitment, and creativity. And these align with the Renzulli three-ring conception of giftedness that we saw in the earlier slide. So under the first category, above average ability, we have three different quantitative metrics. And all of these are going to give us an idea about or they're going to tie to academic and cognitive giftedness or high potential. The second category, task commitment, we have two qualitative metrics relating to this. And this is going to give us an idea about their motivation, their leadership capabilities, etc. And finally, we have one qualitative data metric that is tied to creativity. Now, you might be wondering, why are we using local norms? We didn't have this in the past, but this year we decided to introduce the idea of local norms because we wanted to make our selection process as fair and relevant to our current student population and demographic as possible. So we don't want to rely on international benchmarks or international cutoffs. We want to create our own. We want to have our own. And these local norms will help us compare the students that we have in our school population to each other, ensuring that we recognize what does high potential and what does giftedness looks like in the context of our school, in the context of a BBS student. And we will be establishing local norms using your help. So how are we going to be doing this? We have randomly selected 100 students per cohort. So 100 students in middle school have been selected, as well as 100 students in high school. And these randomly selected students represent our student population. Renzulli scale surveys will be sent to the teachers of those students, so basically to you. So keep an eye out for those emails with the surveys in your inbox. They should be coming within the next week or so. And you will be asked to complete these surveys for the specific students. And then we're going to be using the data from the filled out surveys in order to determine the top 10 and the top 5% cutoffs for each of the identification metric that you saw in the previous slide. Now, we move on to how is a student actually identified for consideration of the gifted program here at BBS. And I hope my like visual is not too complicated, but we have a flow chart to kind of show you how our multi-step selection and identification process looks like. So it's definitely multi-step. We don't kind of just look at one thing at once. As you saw in the table, there were multiple identification metrics involved, and it takes it's like a multi-step process of this identification that takes place. So the first thing that we do is we begin with an initial data screen. So we will be doing a full data screen of all the students in middle and high school. And we're going to be looking at things like in-class GPA or in-class achievement, as well as standardized testing data. So things like MAP scores, iRead scores, whatever standardized testing data we have on file. From that, we're going to be selecting the students that scored 85% or higher on those two metrics at the beginning. So achievement score as well as standardized testing score. We're gonna choose the students that scored at the 85% or higher. We're going to send that initial group of students, we're going to send their teachers Renzulli scale surveys to fill out. And this will form our pool one, so our first pool of students, which these are the students that were selected based on achievement. So based on academic and cognitive giftedness, like that was the main selection criteria for that pool. However, we do not want to only base our selection on academic performance. We also want to look at students that might have other talents that are outside of academics or other forms of giftedness that may not be academically gifted or that might not score really high when it comes to grades or using the traditional grading system. So to allow for this to allow those students to also have a voice, we have the second pool of students which are selected or are nominated by the teachers. So teachers will nominate or have the ability to nominate a student by filling a Renzulli scale survey for whatever student they feel deserves to be in the program. We will then do like the reverse of what happened in pool one. So we will then collect achievement and standardized testing data for those nominated students. And these students will form our pool two. So this is the nomination-based selection or the nomination-based group. From, we're gonna then look at pool one and pool two. We're gonna combine that list of students and we're gonna perform a composite score and using the local norms that we have established, we're gonna perform the final selection. So the top 10% from that list will be considered high potential and they will receive the push-in services, and the top 5% of that list will be considered gifted and they will receive the pull-out service, which is iLeap. They will be part of the iLeap program. So you'll notice that not all students will be in the iLeap program. The iLeap program is going to be designed for the students that are identified as gifted, so a smaller subset of the population, while a larger subset, so the top 10%, will receive the push-in services that take place in the classroom. So what do these things look like? We have the pull-out services in the form of iLeap, as well as the push-in services. This will take the form of professional development for all teachers related to gifted pedagogy, etc. And then me going into the classroom to co-plan and co-teach and create enrichment activities that will benefit those students that have been identified as high potential and gifted inside the classroom. So I'm going to now briefly go over the Renzulli scale surveys that will be sent to your emails. Again, these are the surveys that you can fill at any point to nominate a student for the program. And these types of surveys are going to be mainly based on qualitative data that is collected from your observations of and understanding of the students. And they will help us with some of the metrics that you saw in the identification metrics slide earlier.
So what are the Renzulli Scale surveys? These are research-based tools designed to help teachers just like you identify high potential and gifted students without just looking at academics. They focus on observable behaviors, things that you notice in your classroom day to day, and certain characteristics that might indicate gifted potential. They also look at multiple domains, so things like learning, creativity, as well as motivation and leadership. So we're not just basing this assessment on one set of criteria or one type of characteristic or domain. You'll notice that this is based on several different aspects of potential gifted behavior. Now, the reason why we decided to include the Renzulli scale surveys as one of the major metrics for our identification process is, again, they go beyond academics. And when it comes to our identification process here at PBS, we wanted to make sure that we are not just choosing students who are academically gifted. We wanted to make sure that we're also including students who are gifted in other ways, perhaps creativity, leadership skills, the arts, sports, etc. So these types of scales or these types of surveys help us to recognize hidden talents that might not manifest themselves in cognitive or academic giftedness. They're also research-backed and widely used. So these were developed by Dr. Joseph Renzulli, a leader in gifted education, and they have been used internationally in many different countries and have been successfully shown to identify gifted students. And studies have shown that when they have been used, they actually increase the accuracy of gifted student identification. As teachers, you see your students day to day, or at least a few times a week. So you see your students very often, and you are the most knowledgeable resource when it comes to recognizing gifted characteristics or recognizing those students that might benefit in programs such as iLeap, as well as the push and support that they could receive in the classroom. So you have those students that you know might exhibit certain characteristics that would fit under the gifted category or the high potential category. So these surveys will help you capture a lot of this qualitative data and observations that you already make day to day in your classrooms and help us to quantify these observations and use them towards our selection and identification processes. And finally, these surveys provide fair and inclusive identification because, once again, they help us to reduce the bias of only focusing on students that are academically or cognitively gifted, since we are considering multiple dimensions of giftedness criteria here. So once you're ready to nominate a student or to fill in, you might also be asked to fill in one of these surveys. So the survey kind of looks like this. You'll notice at the beginning we have definition of what each number on the scale means. So one, you would choose one if you've never observed the characteristic that is mentioned in the survey. And then 5, if you always observe the characteristic, if this is something that the student continuously shows in the classroom, or this is something that you are able to see in the student frequently. You would first fill in your name and then the student name. So for the student name, please, it would really be helpful if you could write the full name of the student as it appears on your official Schoolie record. So you can just copy paste their full name on Schoolie onto here. And the reason why that is because we have a lot of students that have repeated names or similar names the same last name, so it's important for me to have the full name of the student. And then you would choose the grade level. Now, this survey that I'm using as an example here is for high school. If you're in middle school, obviously these will be different. And then you're going to kind of list the main reasons why you are nominating the learner. If you are nominating the learner, you would give me a little bit more context in terms of what are their talents, what are their abilities, and do they have any learning needs? Are they, do they have dyslexia? Do they have ADHD? Are they one of those twice exceptional learners we spoke about? So this is where you would give me additional details about the student. If the student is not nominated by you, but rather you were asked to fill the survey for a student, then you could either write what you know about the student here or leave it blank. If there's any additional information that you want me to know about the student that might affect their selection, such as any language barriers, any neurodivergence, again, any mention of twice exceptionality, you would include it here. So you'll notice that the survey is broken down into the different domains I've spoken about. So we are focusing on things, three main domains. Learning characteristics is our first domain. Our second domain is creativity. And our third domain is motivation and leadership. So domains are essentially observable traits that fit under a specific category. So these are kind of the three main things we are looking for when it comes to exceptionality. So learning, creativity, and motivation/leadership. And under each one of the domains, you'll notice that there are a few statements, and this is where you would complete the rating from 1 to 5. So for example, the first statement says, the student demonstrates advanced vocabulary for their age or grade level. And you would just kind of go through that and select the number that you feel matches the student based on your observations of that student in that particular domain. And you would do so for all of the characteristics. It shouldn't take too long. The survey is going to take a maximum of 10 minutes, if even. It can be completed in a much shorter period of time than that. And if there's anything here, any statement that you're unsure what it means, please feel free to reach out to me and I will go over a more detailed explanation of what the statement means. At the end is a kind of like a survey of the special talents that the student might have. So if they do have any special talents in sports or dance, gymnastics, please select it here. If there's anything that is not included on the list, you are welcome to write it down under other. And that's basically it for the Renzulli scale survey.
I hope that was clear. Please feel free to reach out to me with any additional questions, or if you'd like to kind of start planning push-in activities or push-in enrichment services for your students within the classroom, we can definitely work together on setting something up. So my email is shown on the slide, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you.